Glenda Jackson stood center stage, under the bright lights, every eye fixed on her as anticipation crackled through the auditorium. Moments before, she'd swept into the limelight with her signature poise, a woman who'd conquered both stage and screen for decades, and yet, nobody had any idea what was about to happen. Then, with a look that mixed contempt and courage, she turned on her heel and walked off, leaving a stunned audience gasping in her wake. What triggered this sudden, unforgettable departure? Why would an icon of her stature abandon her role so abruptly? To understand that explosive moment, we must trace back through a lifetime defined by defiance, by the uncompromising drive that made Glenda Jackson refuse to stand for anything less than the truth. From her earliest days in Birkenhead, Cheshire, the foundations were laid. Born May 9, 1936, to a mother who scrubbed floors and pulled pints to keep the family afloat, Glenda learned that work wasn't optional, it was survival. She mastered that lesson pore by pore, sweat by sweat. If you didn't work, you didn't eat, she'd recall with wry gravity. And the mantra echoed through every chapter of her life. While classmates with money slipped away to university and grand futures, Glenda toiled in Boots the chemist, stocking shelves for minimum wage, pinching pennies and dreaming of a world beyond the chemist's walls. In that cramped shop, surrounded by labels and prescriptions, she grew restless. The glow of cinema posters in the darkened picture houses offered an escape, each flickering reel promising new lives to inhabit, new truths to speak. It was there, in the hush of a wartime movie theater, that she first tasted the intoxicating power of performance and felt her destiny shift. By 18, she'd wrangled a grant to train at Rade, the only drama school she knew. The path was anything but smooth. She stood her ground against demands to mute her northern accent, insisted her voice rough, hewn, and real remain intact. Where others cloaked themselves in posh tones, she clung to authenticity, forging a new wave that shook the stage's aristocratic veneer. Rade's polished halls became the proving ground where she honed a fearless intensity. She carried that fire into repertory work, performing for a handful of pounds a week in damp lodgings that reeked of mildew and cockroaches. Some nights she slept on shared mattresses, hungry, shivering, aching with flu, and never once missed a performance. Fear, for Jackson, was fuel. Then came the roles that rocked conventions. In 1965, she hurled herself into Marathi's Revolution, appearing bloodied and topless on stage, the raw brutality of the piece laid bare in every whip crack and whispered scream. Outraged audiences damned it communist propaganda, clergy denounced it, and she received death threats. Yet she refused to shrink. She understood that art was a weapon, aimed at the status quo, dissecting power's underbelly. On film, she translated that same ferocity. Women in Love in 1969 delivered one of cinema's most notorious lines, an unflinching invitation into desire, earning her an Academy Award and fueling tabloid gossip about affairs and scandal. Through each triumph, the stakes rose higher. When critics labeled her too harsh to be beautiful, she met their judgment with disdain. When directors fought her, she fought back. Money, she turned down. Scripts, she rewrote. She refused to dilute her performances for comfort or conformity. Stage door critics could sneer all they liked, but when the house lights dimmed, Jackson's presence roared across the boards. She embraced the tension between audience expectation and her own uncompromising standards. forging a contrast that made her exits from theaters, from scenes, from entire motion pictures, seismic events. The most dramatic act of that lifelong rebellion occurred not in film, but in politics under the vaulted ceilings of Parliament. In 1992, trading her Oscar statuettes for a member of Parliament's modest salary, she stormed through the corridors of power, energized by fury at Margaret Thatcher's legacy. And yet, even among seasoned politicians, Glenda Jackson remained unpredictable, her voice a weapon honed by decades in the spotlight. She honed her speeches like roles in a play, timing every pause, unleashing every accusation, forcing audiences to confront the human cost of policy. So when, in a debate over transportation funding, a fellow MP made an offhand remark, a flippant dismissal of the very people Jackson had vowed to serve, something in her snapped. Cameras rolling, microphones live, she rose from her bench, stared straight at the speaker, and delivered a stinging rebuke that cut through the chamber like a dagger. The hall erupted in shouts, in protests, in stunned silence. And just as quickly as she'd stood, she turned and left, the click of her heels echoing through the stunned room. It was vintage Glenda, bold, unyielding, utterly fearless, and it was the moment everyone remembered. What drove her to that point? What inner conviction had been building ever since her days in that chemist shop? The answer lies in the tension between compromise and the cost of truth. Each time she walked off stage, she refused to surrender her integrity. Each time she turned down millions, she put her principles above her purse. It's a story of contrast, of a woman who dared to be more than an icon, who insisted on being a force for change, whether on screen, on stage, or in the halls of government. Her departure on that stage wasn't an exit. It was a declaration, louder than any speech, that she would not be silenced. After that unmistakable click of heels, the chamber fell into stunned silence. Microphones hummed, cameras whirred. Reporters leaned forward in disbelief. Whispers ricocheted off marble walls as MPs exchanged incredulous glances. Did she really just walk out? One murmured, "I've never seen anything like it." Another replied. Within minutes, the clip was splashed across TV screens and splintered into thousands of tweets. Glenda Jackson storming off in mid-debate became a lightning rod for outrage and admiration alike. Opponents labeled it grandstanding. Supporters hailed it as an act of brutal honesty. The public devoured every angle, parliamentary procedures forgotten in the rush of raw emotion. And Glenda, always attuned to the pulse of public sentiment, watched in quiet satisfaction as her message reverberated far beyond Westminster's gilded halls. This wasn't the first time her dramatic exits had made headlines. Decades earlier, her portrayal in Women in Love ignited a different kind of furor. The infamous wrestling scene with co-stars had critics squirming under seats, rating boards storming studios, while box office numbers soared. Oscar buzz swirled not only around her electrifying performance but around the rumors, whispered affairs, backstage clashes with directors, producers pleading for cuts she refused to grant. Each spat, each threat of blacklisting, only served to amplify her legend. She learned early that controversy could be wielded like a scalpel, carving out a reputation for fearless authenticity. Where some stars flinched at scandal, Jackson harnessed it, transforming every argument and every demand for compromise into fuel for her next triumph. On stage, the pattern repeated with chilling consistency. Take The Maids in 1975. Her commitment to the role went beyond rehearsal. Immersing herself in real criminal cases, she lived the character's despair, unnerving cast and crew alike. They spoke of late night rehearsals where her eyes glowed with an intensity that bordered on possession. Audience members fainted during the final murder scene, convinced the violence was unscripted. Directors pleaded, "Enough," but she pressed on, convinced that diluting the fury would betray the play's power. When critics decried her as unhinged, she smiled, knowing those unhinged. Performances sold more tickets than any tamed rendition ever could. Each shockwave she sent through theater circles only strengthened her resolve to refuse any compromise on her vision. Her personal life bore its share of turmoil, often entwined with her professional rebellions. Married for 16 years, she navigated the demands of motherhood even as early Oscar glory beckoned. Her son Dan grew up backstage and in dormitory digs, sometimes watching his mother collapse from exhaustion between scenes. When tabloids caught wind of an affair with a lighting director, she refused to issue denials or apologies. "My love life is mine," she'd retort, turning intrusive headlines into punchlines. Divorce followed, agony wrapped in public scrutiny, and yet Jackson emerged not broken, but irrevocably herself. She refused to let personal heartbreak silence her artistry. If anything, it deepened her performances, lending them an edge forged from real pain. Politics offered a new stage for her unrelenting spirit. As an MP, she donned no costume, spoke no lines written by ghostwriters. Her speeches bore the cadence of stage monologues. Pauses weighted with accusation, asides delivered with a piercing glare. When she slept on Westminster's pavements to spotlight homelessness, cynics panned it as a stunt. She called it empathy in action. Yet again, she refused to temper her methods to suit critics. When she challenged her own party's austerity measures, she stood alone against cabinet colleagues, her voice cracking like a whip through hushed corridors. Every walkout, every protest, echoed her earlier defiance in RADA's halls, and reminded both voters and adversaries that Glenda Jackson answered to no one but her conscience. Underlying every dramatic gesture lay a single, unyielding ethos: integrity over expedience. From stocking shelves in that grimy chemist's shop to pacing RADA's polished corridors, she never wavered from the principle that art and politics must reflect unvarnished truth. She paid for that principle with broken contracts, lost salaries, angry producers, and career standoffs. Yet each loss felt smaller than the price of compromise. The contrast between her raw authenticity and the delicately polished world around her created a tension that audiences found irresistible. She didn't simply play roles, she inhabited them in full brunt, refusing to mute her northern twang or soften her glare, always insisting that the world meet her on her own terms. And so, as the video of her final exit continues to loop online, one question looms larger than any other. What is the cost of silence for someone who has never known how to be silent? Over 80 years, she answered that question with every script revision, every blackout exit, every unapologetic speech in Parliament. Her legacy isn't measured in box office receipts or election margins. It's etched in the moments she chose principle over protocol, truth over comfort, in those clicks of heels and flashes of camera bulbs. We find not only the story of a fearless icon, but a blueprint for refusing the easy path. a testament to what happens when you dare to walk away rather than stand down. Her breakthrough on screen didn't arrive on a gentle wave of applause. It crashed like a storm. In 1969's Women in Love, Jackson hurled herself into the role of Gudrun Brangwyn, delivering a line so raw that critics blanched and audiences leaned forward in stunned fascination. "How are your thighs? Are they strong? Because I want to drown in flesh." It wasn't window dressing or coy implication. It was an invitation into unbridled desire, and it sold tickets in droves. Tabloids fanned rumors of on-set affairs and heated clashes with director Ken Russell, but she refused to temper her intensity. Where other actresses might shy from controversy, Jackson leaned in, using every whisper of scandal as a signpost, guiding new viewers to her magnetic performance. Just 2 years later, she crossed from incendiary drama into disarming charm with a touch of class. The picture looked, on paper, like a sweet romantic comedy, but behind the camera tension simmered. Co-star George Segal's loose, improvisational style clashed with Jackson's meticulous preparation, until rehearsals felt like a tennis match fueled by frustration. Scripts were torn, directors intervened, and at one point she threatened to walk unless production paused. When the film premiered, the box office numbers proved her instincts correct. It grossed $16.8 million on a modest budget. Jackson proved she could master light comedy without diminishing her reputation for power. She won her second Academy Award, confirming that defiance and elegance could coexist in perfect harmony.